Hi guys, Elly here from Maxon UK, and in today's tutorial I'll be showing you how to create your own audio-visual graphics using Cinema 4D's MoGraph, and we'll be creating this. So as soon as you've opened up Cinema 4D, you're going to grab yourself a sphere. We're going to take that down to 5 centimeters, and then we're going to throw that into a cloner. We're going to change it to grid array, so change the mode, and then we want the count to be 15 by 15 by 15, and that will create our cube of spheres. With our cloner selected, we're going to come up to MoGraph and we're going to apply our first effector, which is going to be the shader effector. If we come up to parameter, we want uniform scale as -1, and it will disappear, but that's absolutely fine. And for now, this will come in handy for later. We want our color mode to be on and use alpha/strength to also be on. If we come over to shader, we want a custom shader, and then add a noise. If you click the square, the little icon, you can see how this is affecting now our spheres. And you have many different types of noise. I know I want wavy turbulence, but by all means find the one that suits you best. I'm going to take my global scale up to 1000. You can change the seed, and you can see how that affects the look. I'm just going to leave it on that one. Animation speed I'm going to set to 1. And then our movement I'm going to set to 100 by 100 by 100. And then if we play that, let's have a look. Okay, so you can see it's animating, that custom shader is animating around the clones and affecting them using the wavy turbulence noise. Okay, so you can also affect the low clip, high clip, brightness and contrast. And if I just move that up, you can see the effect that these have. So by all means, have a play. And at the moment that doesn't look like much, but we're about to add our sound effector and add a soundtrack. And we're going to see how that changes the look. So our cloner selected again, we go to MoGraph effector, then sound effector. Then you want to grab yourselves your own track. So if I play this, you can hear, and if you be doing the same, you'll notice that it actually doesn't play the track properly. It's as if it's trying to play the entire track over every frame, and the reason this is because we have all frames selected. So if I go back and play it again, so it's actually playing the track correctly. If I increase this, you can hear that. Okay, perfect. So once you've got your track in, set our distribution to blend. And if we see down here, we have our amplitude graph, and you can add probes, remove probes, and that's what these boxes are, and that's what is going to affect your clones. So I know I want one probe roughly like this, and another over here. So this will affect our high and our low frequencies. If we come to parameter, at the moment, all that's affecting is the position on the Y axis by 50 centimeters. But we don't want that. We don't want position at all. Come to scale again, uniform scale, and 10. And now if we press play, so let's find part of our track that has a lot more instruments in. Here we go. So we can see how that is now working alongside the shader to affect the size of the spheres depending on the frequency of our track. which I think is quite cool, especially when you're doing things like audio visuals. So if this was in the background of a festival or a DJ set, I think it would look quite cool if it went along with the track. One little tip, if you put decay up to 50, it creates less of a vibrating effect and more of like a smooth animation, which is something that I prefer. I'm going to set my strength to 130 because I want it to really make those spheres pop out. Just come over to parameter again. I'm going to set my colour mode to on, and this will become apparent as to why I've done this when we add the material later. So for now, I'm happy to leave that as it is. If I come into my cloner, you can see we've got our effectors here. And because I did the shader first, it's actually put it above the sound effector. But what I want to do is put the sound effector above, and you can play with the strength of your effectors here. And I'm going to just drop my sound down to 90%. Next, if you find a selection of your track that you want to render out, so I'm only going to render out 800 frames to 1600 frames because I know there's a really nice build up in the track, and then it kind of has like a slight pause and then a drop. So I mentioned about the material. So if you double click in your material manager and open this up, under the color channel, if you click texture, we want colorizer, and if you click the square, you can come into the shader properties. And if we come down, so click the texture again, and we're going to come down to MoGraph and color shader. Now you can select however many colors you want. I'm going to select 2, so I'm going to have a pinky color and a blue. And what's going to happen when I throw that on, you can see my smaller spheres are going to be blue, and it's going to be a gradient up to the pink color for the larger spheres. And what happens is they're going to change color depending on the frequency of the track, because that's now connected to the sound effector. So if I play this, see how the colours change depending on the track, and the size of the spheres effectively is what it's changing. So now we have the basic animation completed. We've got the sound file on there, and we've got our effectors. What I would do now is I would do a low res render, just basically so it's not going to take too much time, but I can see how the animation looks as a whole, how all 800 frames come together. It won't take me very long, and then I'll be able to see if I want to make any changes to my animation without having to do a long render. So we come up to our render settings. I'm going to set my output to 720 by 720. Manual frames, mine is 800 to 1600 frames. This may not necessarily be the same as yours. I'm going to save this as sound square, if I can type, low res render. And then we want that to be an MP4 file, anti-aliasing geometry, and we want no ambient occlusion and no global illumination, because they're really the sort of things that make your render look great but equally really rack up that render time. Find your best angle, and then we hit render. So now that's completed. That didn't take too long, it only took 3 minutes. We can have a look at what that looks like. We can take a look at that. Okay, so that's looking pretty good. So now we've got our low res render. This is the time for you to make any changes to your effectors or your materials before we then look at doing a high res render. So now what we're going to do, we're going to add ourselves a spline and a camera and have it rotate around the cube to create a really cool looking animation. So if we get ourselves a circle spline on the XZ axis. Make that a bit bigger. Get ourselves we're going to use a target camera, and the target is going to be a null. And the thing is, normally I'd put my object in there and have that be the target, but because the null's bang in the middle anyway, I don't need to do that. On the camera, I'm going to right click and go to align to spline, and then I'm going to drop my circle spline into the spline path. So now if we take a look through the camera, and then this is when you can see if your circle spline is not big enough or too big. You can make it bigger, make sure you've got it all in view. So if we come up to the align to spline tag, what we can do is we can increase our position, and this is a position the camera is along the spline, along the circle spline. So I think that is quite cool. So now we're going to set some keyframes. So we come to 800, we're going to set the position on the circle spline to 0%, and then we come up to 1200, set it to 100%, set another keyframe, and then 1600 back to 0, set another keyframe. So if we come all the way back to the beginning, let's see what that looks like. Cool. Right, so I'm happy with that. Now you could do another low res render test to make sure you're happy with the movement of that, but if not, now is the time to get it looking how you want it to look. So find a good angle, and now we're going to add some ambient occlusion, global illumination, and a sky with a HDRI to get that really cool final look, which obviously is going to increase your render time massively, but it will be worth it and it will look great. Now if we add ourselves a sky, come into our content browser, search HDRI. I'm going to use Cityscape Bright Day HDRI image, and we're going to drop that onto our sky. Then we're going to right click, go to Cinema 4D tags and then compositing, and we're going to hide scene by camera because we don't want it to be seen. We're going to throw on a background. I am just going to do a plain black. And one final thing I will do is I'm just going to add a standard light, and we're going to have soft shadows, and it's really going to kind of pop as the music's changing and the sphere's changing as well. So once that's completed, we can come up to our render settings and we can change these. We just want current frame because I just want to see what these render settings will make it look like without having to render out the entire scene. Set that to JPEG, anti-aliasing, we're going to do best. Add some ambient occlusion. I always turn my samples up to 100 and then nope. Global illumination. Here we go. Okay, I think that is everything. We come out and then we hit render. This might take a little bit more time because obviously we've got the added render settings to make it look really cool. Okay, so I think that looks great, and to me, I'm happy to now render that out as an MP4. When I do that, I'm going to come back to my render settings, set that to an MP4, find your file path where you'd want that to be saved to. I didn't change the name for that high-res render, which I probably should have done, but it's not too much of a problem. Come back to manual frames, 800 by 1600, and then we're good to hit render. I hope you enjoyed the video and thanks for watching. Don't forget to subscribe and check us out at blog.maxon.co.uk.